Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on postgraduate study in the USA. So tonight I'm going to be giving kind of a broad overview of choosing, funding, and applying for US study. There will be a little time at the end for questions and answers, and this webinar will be recorded if you want to look back on it at a future date. There are more videos available on our YouTube channel, so for more specific information or to view a previous webinar, please do look us up. My name is Louisa, and I'm an EducationUSA manager here at Fulbright, US-UK Fulbright Commission. So what is EducationUSA? Well, we are an advisory service that is part of the EducationUSA network, which is a US Department of State network of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world that help international students with how to study in the USA and to figure out on how to go about that process. Our center is based at the US-UK Fulbright Commission in London, but we are paired up with Commission to help people explore education in the US at graduate level, and at graduate level provide awards to graduate students to go to the US. Our aim as EducationUSA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to help UK students study in the US. So if your dream is to study in the United States, we are here to help you. So why study in the USA? So the US offers a wide range of choices. There are over 1,700 universities offering postgraduate degrees in the US compared to about 120 here in the UK. That is a lot of variety in institution and also amongst the different academic departments. Another reason to study in the US is that you will internationalize your CV. So employers cite cross-cultural experience as an attractive quality, but it also helps to have diverse experiences and demonstrates your independence and the qualities necessary to study abroad. Global networking is the next point. So US universities give you an unparalleled opportunity to create global networks, not only with the American faculty and institutions, but with diverse colleagues which make up so many of the US universities. Practical experience. So many opportunities for hands-on research, internships, and teaching opportunities. It also allows you to expand your horizons. So living and studying in another country expands your worldwide view and may expand the opportunities available to you in the future. And then finally, which is surprising to some, but funding opportunities. There are a lot of funding schemes and scholarships available at postgraduate level, which we'll talk about later. So you might be wondering what the key differences are between the US and the UK in studying postgrad at each country. So one of the main differences is the duration. So typically in the US, programs are longer, so 2 years for masters. So there are 1-year programs out there, and more along the lines of 4 to 6 years for PhDs. So this may be less or more depending on the program and department. There's an integrated master's in the PhD in the first year or two of coursework, and those who have a master's already can use this time to sharpen skills and gain more experience through teaching or doing research, perhaps as an assistant. Typically, a master's is a mandatory component of a degree. There are no pure research degrees, so programs include coursework on postgraduate level. There are no set fees or standard application deadlines in the US, and these vary greatly between universities and by departments. And in the US, postgraduate programs are organized by department, not by the supervisor. So you do not need to know your supervisor beforehand, especially since programs are more interdisciplinary, which means you may have multiple supervisors or even a committee. And you do not need to have an in-depth research proposal ready, as they expect you to figure this out throughout your program. And then finally, law and medicine is also studied at postgraduate level and cannot be studied as an undergrad. So looking at the timeline of applying, we recommend beginning to research programs 12 to 18 months before enrollment. We recommend that you finalize the selection of 3 to 6 universities to where you'll be applying around 10 to 12 months before you plan to enroll. This is around the same time you want to be taking any admissions exams too. Looking forward, about 8 to 10 months before you enroll, you'll put together applications and submit them according to the deadlines. Around 4 to 7 months before, in the spring before you enroll, you can expect to hear back from the universities you have applied to with their admission decisions. And based off of where you are accepted, you'll notify universities of your decisions and apply for a visa around 1 to 3 months before enrollment. We have many resources on our website to help you with your pre-departure, including travel advice, living arrangements, and campus life. But typically, courses start around mid-August to early September, which is slightly earlier in the UK, so you will begin your studies kind of earlier on in the late summer. So choosing a program, there are over 1,700 institutions offering postgraduate programs, so a lot of options, and each institution and department will be completely different. So how do you go about narrowing down where you actually want to apply to? So a term that we focus on a lot at Fulbright Commission is the idea of fit. What this means is we really want the students to find a program that is really going to be the best fit for you and your personal and academic interests. So the first step in the choosing process is locating what factors are important to you, making a list of what will really matter to you. Don't just go looking at universities that you've heard of straight away, ones that perhaps you see mentioned in movies or TV programs, or ones that have highest rankings, as you might actually miss out on some great universities, great programs, and great opportunities. So some of the factors you might want to consider when choosing a program are the types of institutions. Would you want to look at a public institution or a private university? Are you looking for somewhere really large, a large student body, or somewhere a bit smaller? Secondly, program type. So at the postgraduate level, this is arguably more important than the institution itself. So you have to consider your career goals, your qualifications, and any concentrations you might be interested in. Do you want to be in a program with funded internship opportunities? Perhaps a program where you can get grant writing experience? Think about what you want from your program experience from the very beginning. Thirdly, academic departments. So choosing the right department is almost as important as choosing the right university at postgraduate level. It will influence so much of your experience in the US. At postgraduate level, academic departments generally handles admissions. It designs a course structure for students and it monitors the students' progress through the program. So it's essential to research a department to find the right academic home for you. Departments can vary drastically at each university in areas of faculty expertise, elective courses and concentrations, whether they are tightly focused or more interdisciplinary, size and atmosphere, and then opportunities for teaching, research, conference attendance, and internships. Fourth on the list, we have location. So the US is a massive country that spans across 6 different geographical time zones. So you have to start thinking, do you prefer urban or rural? Are you concerned about the climate? Do you want hot weather or are you not that bothered? Is access to transport important to you? Have you looked at centres of excellence in your field? So for example, looking at DC for political science or New York for finance. And then what are your interests and what can you access in terms of extracurricular opportunities? The final factor to consider are finances, but we will talk about this in more depth about funding later. But if funding is important to you, then this needs to be part of your choosing process right from the very start. We always say follow the money, and so if you need funding to pursue postgraduate study in the US, be sure to look out for those opportunities from the very start. So, with that in mind, and so many different factors to consider, how might you go about narrowing down your options? Our website has a page on choosing a university, which includes a list of links of helpful search engines, for example, Peterson's and gradschools.com. You can also start narrowing your options by contacting previous professors to see whether they have any advice or opinions on schools that could be a good fit for you, professionals or colleagues in your field, or contacting schools in your discipline, thinking through the work of scholars you've previously read. For example, is there anyone you've identified as doing the kind of research you would like to do? Where are they teaching? And what are their colleagues working on, for example? So you want to think about narrowing down your choice to about 10 or so universities that you want to research further. So here we have an example of the Peterson search engine linked on a website I mentioned earlier. It is particularly helpful to decide and rank what factors are important to you in choosing university. And through a filter, you can select a variety of factors like location, tuition fees, and school size and settings to narrow down the list further. Once you do narrow down your choice to about these 10 universities I've been talking about, research them further on the university website and reach out to them directly. So your goal is to select about 3 to 6 institutions where you will actually submit an application to. To narrow down your option, we advise that you look on each university website where you can find more information on their faculty. Some even list the CVs of a faculty, their research interests, and a list of their publications. They can also provide contact information for specific professors to reach out to. Find out that they're still working on something that interests you. You might also want to reach out to current grad students. This will provide valuable insights into their experience as graduate students at a particular university. Some universities have Zoom calls that you can book with current students, or even drop in Zoom coffee sessions. Ask them how close they are with their supervisors, ask them what campus culture is like, or you can ask more broad questions about what the local area is like, how to find a good apartment, and what the cost of living is. So, now that you've narrowed down the options, let's talk about funding. And funding is one of the top things we get asked about. And there is a common misconception that the US is always more expensive. The good news is that there is a significant amount of funding available on postgraduate level, particularly if you're willing to be flexible and go into the process with an open mind. So, where is the money? There are 4 types of funding for study in the US. So firstly, we have personal and family funds. There is a culture in the US of saving and paying for university in a way that we don't have in the loan-based system here in the UK. There is an expectation that you'll make a contribution to your studies. The next source of funding is US universities. So this is the best resource of funding as it doesn't have to be paid back. There are 2 common types of university-based funding that we can talk about. So the first are fellowships, which are outright grants to allow recipients to focus solely on their work. The second is assistantships, which are offered in return for services provided to the department, either through teaching, research, lab supervision, or working on campus in a campus office in exchange for fee waivers, health insurance, and or a stipend. So assistantships are renewable year to year, and if the student maintains specified academic standards, they can carry on with this. And the terms of assistantships will vary dramatically between universities and departments and depend on available grants, the field of study, and department need. This is why it's always important to ask the department or program about this kind of funding when you're choosing where to apply. There is more funding generally available for PhDs and students in research-focused masters than for professional degree students. It also varies by subject area. For example, sciences tend to receive more funding than programs in the humanities. But do check with multiple offices about funding opportunities. Check with department, the graduate school, if applicable, and the financial aid office. So another source of funding are external funding bodies. These cover niche scholarships, and they perhaps come from institutions that are separate to universities, for example, companies, charities, foundations such as the US-UK Fulbright Commission. And the last source are loans. So most US lenders will require a US citizen to co-sign on the loan. Therefore, most UK citizens take out private loans from a UK bank. However, we would highly encourage you to examine the terms and interest rates closely. If you are an American or dual US-UK citizen, you can take out a loan from a US lender and apply for US federal loans through FAFSA. Please look at our website for more information if this applies to you. But keep in mind that universities and external funding bodies are preferred options since they don't have to be paid back. So, now that you're aware of the sources of funding, we advise you consider a funding strategy to try and lower costs and manage expenses. So you might think of 3 different approaches. You could reduce the cost of living drastically by looking at rural campuses versus urban campuses. So living in a rural area will be far less expensive than in an urban area. You can also look at regional costs. So it's a bit like here in the UK, for example, living in London versus Lancaster. So New York and LA will be miles more expensive than states like Ohio or Michigan. So if funding is important, this is something that you can start thinking about at the very beginning. You could also look to lower tuition costs. So public universities in the US, so state-funded universities, generally have lower costs than private universities. However, private universities might have more funding, and funding would vary by department within each university. You could look for university funding in addition to the ways we've already talked about. You could seek funding outside of your program. For example, architecture with interest in environmental architecture and making buildings more green. If you're looking into something like that, you perhaps could seek funding from 2 different departments. You might not necessarily be able to use all of these strategies in one go, but you might find that universities with low tuition fees have fewer funding opportunities. Be aware of the different factors at play and make sure you do your research. An example of a funding strategy is looking at attending different universities in a specific area and comparing their costs. For example, we have 2 universities here on the screen in Boston. So the first is Boston University, where cost of attendance within the Department of Education and Human Development is over $85,000 with tuition, room, board, and other fees. Compare this to an MA at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, where tuition and off-campus finances would be $40,000 less. It's a huge difference. So both unis are in the same city with a great variance in tuition and fees. Keep yourself open-minded. Sometimes close by universities also have links and relationships with others. So where you might be able to take a class at BU, you will be fully enrolled at UMass, and you can kind of cross over to both universities and take classes in both departments from both different universities. Now, I'd like to take a little look at a few examples of how to identify funding opportunities. So for university funding, the best resource, like I said, is the university website itself, the department, graduate school, and financial aid pages. Check all 3 of them in case not all funding opportunities are advertised centrally. Check what they say. Do they have much funding available? Universities generally try to give you an accurate but conservative measure of how much funding they offer. If this information isn't available online, it might suggest that they can't offer a lot of financial support, but it's worth getting in touch with the departmental administrator or director just to inquire. Think about whether you'll be a competitive applicant for funding at that particular institution. Ask current students how competitive funding really is, what their assistantships involve, what the work-life balance is like, just to get some inside information. Perhaps you can also ask how many assistantships are available. Are they full or partial? And if possible, find out what basis they award in what basis they award assistantships. Is an admission exam score factored into this, or is it more on the basis of your academics or prior experience? Find out if there are extra requirements you need to fulfill to be considered for an assistantship. You may be automatically considered, but in some cases, applicants may need to submit an additional essay or resume. I will show you an example now of what you can look out for on a website. So this is a website for the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. This is a top public research university. I have highlighted some key points in their section about fellowships and assistantships and how to identify when a university has funding available. As you can see, most universities who are generous with funding will make it quite obvious on their websites. In the Department of Political Science here, they note that most students in their department are supported by fellowships and assistantships. It also explains that duties typically range from 10 to 15 hours a week and lists the type of duties you can expect. It mentions eligibility for a variety of fellowships and also notes that Chapel Hill has a low cost of living. So you can see that 2 points of a funding strategy exist here, both the university funding and the lower cost of living. Here on the screen, we have some more examples of scholarships from external bodies. These are non-university scholarships and can be part or full funding. There are different resources for exploring external funding scholarships. So online scholarship searches exist, and they are listed on our website's postgraduate guide. You can use these searches to help narrow down the thousands of scholarships available based on various factors and allow you to find out more information about the eligibility. Please make sure that you refer to the funding body's website for information about the application process and deadlines. But as you can see, there are many different non-university scholarships funding available. And this is one of them, the Fulbright Awards. So funding is available through Fulbright for UK students to study and conduct research in the US and vice versa at PG level. The number of awards fluctuates each year. Applications open in February with a deadline beginning of May, for study beginning the following year. So yes, before you may have even applied. There are a variety of awards available, some for first year only, other partner awards are fully funded, so please do check on our website for more details. The scholarship also offers the IIE placement model, which will provide more generous funding and support with finding the right university for you. So if you have any questions on that, please do visit our website, fulbright.org.uk, and click on Fulbright Awards Programme for more information. So some final tips as I wrap up information about funding. First of all, applying for funding often happens simultaneous to the admissions process, so begin search for funding very early. Be willing to put in the time and effort to seek out and apply for funding opportunities. Scholarships will not find you. You need to investigate the university funding and take the time to search for the often niche external scholarships. You should be flexible in choosing universities. If it is essential for you to receive funding to complete a PG, choose departments with a lot of funding or where you are competitive and a top student. Exam scores and grades of last year's admitted students are sometimes on the university website, so you can compare. For university funding, the best resource is the university website itself. So check the department, graduate school, and financial aid pages, all three of them, in case not all funding opportunities are advertised centrally. And then finally, keep in mind that you can typically work on campus up to 20 hours a week during term time and 40 hours a week during holidays. So these expected earnings can't be calculated for visa purposes when showing proof of funds. So now we've discussed a guide on the choosing process and how to determine your fit at particular universities, as well as ways to fund your studies in the US. And here I'd like to reiterate that doing that in-depth research in the choosing process is so important. When you get familiar with the programs you're looking at, you can then put together the most competitive application possible for them, and the more competitive your application, the better your chances are at securing funding. So the more time you spend in the research process, the more benefits it will bring you in the application and funding process. So in this section, I'm going to bring you through the main components on completing an application. So what are universities looking for? So this varies in program applications. So MBA versus molecular physics, they'll be looking for very different things. US universities look for academic achievement measured by your undergraduate or, if possible, postgraduate degree results and admission test scores. Most want to see at least a 2.2 on a bachelor's degree. You can contact individual departments or programs about whether your qualifications are sufficient to be considered for admissions. And most universities won't have strict entry requirements, but should be able to give you an approximate idea of whether your academic profile is roughly in line with their usual admitted students. Academic fit is also important. So reasons for pursuing a postgraduate degree at their institutions and how it helps towards your goals. By giving these reasons, you're going to show them that you are a good academic fit. Of course, they like to see relevant work experience and coursework and your extracurricular involvement at university. So US universities want to see a pattern of relevant work and study experience, laying a strong academic and practical foundation for your studies, as well as your ability and interest in being involved both in and outside the classroom. US campuses are very lively places, and so they want to see your personality coming through in your application. They may also want to know why you want to study in the US specifically. And in terms of the application components, there's no standard process for applications, and these will vary by university to university. They'll set their own deadlines and application requirements, but most of them will follow a roughly similar format, and you'll be able to reuse or adapt the materials you prepare for each. So most will include an application form with basic information, admission test scores, which will be sent to the university by the organization that administered the test, transcript listing your academic marks, personal statement describing your academic interests, your goals, relevant experience, 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. You'll likely be required to gather, like I said, 2 to 3. The university may provide some loose guidelines for selecting referees. For example, they might ask for 1 letter from an academic or 1 letter from a professional referee. So when you do put these together, please do choose someone who knows you well, both in and out of the classroom. They'll also likely ask you for a CV, so a resume, which lists your professional and extracurricular accomplishments. An interview may be required for students applying for an MBA, occasionally for research degrees too, depending on the program. Auditions, so if you're applying for programs in the arts, this is likely to be required. Art students may also submit a portfolio of work, while students applying for research-focused degrees may be asked to submit a writing sample. And finally, just so you factor this in, an application fee of $50 to $150 per application is standard. So one thing you'll want to think about when you're choosing universities is how your academic profiles compare to other applicants. How do universities measure you up as a potential colleague or student? So consider your grades, your UK qualifications, your test scores for US admission scores, research, your dissertation, what was your dissertation like as part of your undergraduate degree? Have you got relevant work experience? So some programs, for example, MBAs, this is very important, whereas other programs, it might not be as important. But really think about the X factor, so anything that makes you stand out to determine where you will likely be accepted, competitive and competitive for funding. So as an international student, maybe you had a really unique undergraduate program and can make a strong case as to why you would bring something unique to their program. Perhaps you'll bring an interesting mix of ideas and really be able to contribute something new and lively to their program of study. So admission tests are something that we're going to talk about next. I've mentioned them a few times, and these act as a method of evaluation due to a lack of national curriculum and kind of helps level the playing field a little bit. So the GRE, the Graduate Record Exam, this measures your verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and analytical writing skills. And this is normally asked for master's programs. GMAT and MBA programs are sat for business programs. The LSAT is for JD programs, but not for LLM law programs. They instead require a first degree in law. And then MCAT are for MD programs, medical admissions. They're quite different to what we're used to here in the UK. They are multiple choice and they have a strict time limit. So how important are these tests in admissions decisions? It depends. Some universities may not require them at all. For others, it might factor into their decision, but they're more interested in your personal statement and your transcript. It could well be that some programs will be more interested in your analytical writing and verbal reasoning scores than how you did on quantitative reasoning section, the quantitative reasoning section. It really just depends. So ask the university how much weight is given to admission tests during your research process. To ensure you take the appropriate test and to confirm that you need to take the test at all, also consult the website of each university to which you plan to apply. Pay close attention to the university's application deadline and plan your exam schedule accordingly. Make sure you register early for exams. This leaves the option to retake an exam if necessary. Do properly prepare for the exam. So there are lots of free prep materials online, as well as the option to buy study guides. And then finally, since COVID, trying to make them as accessible as possible. For example, you can now take the GRE at home or the GMAT as an online exam. So coming to the most important part of the application, the personal statement, it is not like a UCAS personal statement, but the opportunity to showcase what you can bring. It's not an in-depth research proposal. Some unis may ask for a separate research statement outlining your research interests and future plans. Some may ask for essays instead of a statement, and others may ask you to address something specific, so make sure you check requirements carefully. The statement helps reveal individual character, motivation, future goals and interests, and kind of describing why that particular university, program, or field. So in writing your personal statement, since there's usually no set structures for writing, you have the opportunity to be very creative and to make yourself stand out. Some students choose to start with an anecdote describing how they became interested in their field of study. Others use a central theme to link and describe their experience and future plans for their studies and career. But this is not a place to be modest. It's a time to sell yourself as an applicant. There are loads more tips on our website, including examples of successful personal statements. So please do visit our website for a more in-depth look into what you can do to make your personal statement amazing. So letters of recommendation, like I said, you're usually required to gather 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. So ask a variety of people who know you really well. There may be some loose guidelines. Like I mentioned, they might ask for an academic and a professional referee. And choose referees that will complement your application package and each other. So you get a good balance of classroom versus professional, research versus extracurricular. You are able to meet with a referee to discuss your letter. It might be helpful to give a copy of the application, a transcript, or your CV, for example, and you can tell them the reasons for doing a postgraduate degree in the US or in your chosen field, your interest in the particular university selected, and your future goals. So by doing this, you make sure your referee is aware of what you're looking for, but also touch base on deadlines and the paperwork they need to complete. So these letters are a bit of a marketing tool for you as an applicant. You can make suggestions for the content of a letter, but it's important you don't see the actual letter before it gets sent off to university so you can maintain credibility. You can also direct referees to mention your ability to succeed at postgraduate level, observations about your performance, ability to positively contribute to discussion or to a team, your leadership qualities, your character, and your passion. Above all, encourage your referees to avoid being restrained and too modest. So American referees tend to write in an enthusiastic tone, use positive and descriptive language, discuss the applicant both in and out of the classroom, and bear in mind what will be written about your American counterparts when preparing your UK referees to write their letters, because you want to stand out as much as they do. So other ways we can help here at the Fulbright Commission. Like I've mentioned many times before, we have an amazing website full of advice, guides, and events that we put on, just like this webinar. So if you look at the tabs at the top, the third one along, you can find our Education USA advice, where you can choose postgraduate study in the USA with loads more detailed, comprehensive guides on choosing funding and applying to US study. We hold a variety of online events such as this webinar regularly, and if you do miss them, we have a range of videos covering different topics on YouTube. We also take part in university fairs across the country, so we will be in Glasgow, I think, on the 18th of February, so if you're around, come say hi. We have events in London, in Liverpool, and in different places in the country across the year. So please do look at our website in the events section for more information. We also take questions by email. We check our advising inbox Monday to Friday, and we answer every single email. So it might take us some time because we're a very small team here in the UK, but do reach out to us if you have any questions as you go along with the process.